Hey guys, it has been a long time since I've made a YouTube video, so I'm just trying to get back into it right now and try to remember this whole process. So today, just to kind of ease back into things, I wanted to make this a simple video and just kind of go over the current kit that I'm using for recording these YouTube videos, for taking pictures of my family, and also for doing some part-time work on the side along with my full-time job. So I am currently using the R5, which I'm recording on right now. Awesome camera, and even though it's a few years old now, I think it's a few years old, it's still an amazing performer. Even though the Canon R5 doesn't have a BSI sensor or a stack sensor like some of the more modern cameras like the Nikon and the Sony are putting out, you're still going to be able to get great pictures out of it. And if you do want that, you can go with the Canon R3, but in the whole grand scheme of things, it's not going to really matter too much. And also, I'm not doing sports or nature photography where I'm using the electronic shutter and I really need those 20 to 30 frames per second without the rolling shutter, so it doesn't really matter to me. So along with the Canon R5, I am using the Canon R5C. I went with the R5C because I really enjoy the video quality that comes from the Canon R5, but I did not enjoy the overheating, so obviously I went with something that does not overheat. And you know, I'm not going to make this a whole video about the R5C, but the image quality, the video image quality that comes out of this camera is definitely better than on the R5, even though it has the same sensor. So it just makes sense, because if I'm doing some kind of photography event, like if I'm doing one of the random weddings that I do throughout the year, or if I am doing a family portrait session, then it's nice to have a backup camera to the R5. Unfortunately, I did something really dumb. I was updating the firmware on that camera yesterday, and long story short, I ended up having to turn the camera off, and now it won't power on, so I am going to need to send that in, so that's a bummer. In terms of lenses, I made a video about this a little while ago, but I did end up selling my RF85 1.2 lens. Even though it's an amazing lens, it just wasn't for me. I found that it was sitting on the shelf a lot. When I did take it out, it was great. The clients loved the photos. That, you know, maximum 1.2 aperture did come in handy a couple times during some low light ceremonies. But ultimately, I did not use that lens enough to justify having a lens that expensive. So I went with the 70-200 f2.8, and that kind of covers everything that I do and is more my style. So I think it's better for video work. It is definitely better for travel, because for a 70-200 f2.8 lens, that thing is tiny. So using it for things like landscape and travel, that's been amazing. And obviously it covers that 85mm focal length. It has a really nice, pleasing look to the background or the out of focus areas. And I think that down the line, if I need a wider aperture telephoto lens for portraits, I'll just go with the 135. It's a little bit cheaper than the 85, and then it's also more variety in my kit. So I felt like the 50 and the 85 were pretty close. So yeah, I think I'd go with the 135. I do still have the 50mm 1.2. That's still my favorite lens. It's great for everything pretty much, even, you know, portraits. But I do find myself leaning more towards grabbing portraits of people that also include the environment. So 50mm is sort of perfect for that, and I'd be curious to pick up a 35mm lens at some point. So because I used to have one when I shot Nikon, and I really liked it. And finally, I'm using the 15-35mm f2.8 to record this video. I mean, it's a great all-around landscape lens. I've used it for astrophotography. It's perfect for event work where you need to capture the environment in indoor locations, and it's also great for portrait and group photos. So I think that's something that makes this lens really stand out even from other systems like Nikon and Sony, is that you do have the ability to have this large aperture, ultra wide lens. But then without switching lenses, you can grab those group photos and those individual portraits and still have that certain type of look to it. But that's why I ended up keeping the lens, because it's great for everything. But that's it for my kit. I'm keeping it pretty simple these days. Feel free to share what you guys are shooting with and why. And if you've switched to a Nikon or Sony, I'd also be curious to hear on why you did that. I've been thinking about trying out the Nikon Z8 just because I came from Nikon in the past, and the Z8 looks awesome. I was able to kind of play with it for a little bit. The only thing I don't like on the Z8 is that there's no mechanical shutter, and the electronic sounds that they've added to mimic a shutter are pretty bad. So it makes it sound like pretty cheap, and you don't really get that tactile feedback. So that was the biggest thing I didn't like about that camera. Alright, that was a short video, but that is it for today. I will see you guys later.